Okay, this is it. I'm gonna kill the boss. Oh no. I died. This boss is just way too hard. There is no way I'm gonna be able to kill it. Oh, hang on. I can resurrect. If I go into my inventory, I can boost my attack, my vitality with items. I can even boost my resurrective power. This game is just way simpler than I thought. Maybe it doesn't need an easy mode. So Sekiro's been out for a couple of weeks now, and I've really got to say it is so rare to get a single player game that is not full of microtransactions, doesn't have any strings attached, and the icing on the cake, not an exclusive to the Epic Games Store. I went almost completely blind into Sekiro. I love Dark Souls, and I honestly think I can say that the series reignited my love for modern gaming, which was stagnating at the time. PC gaming wasn't in a great place, games were constantly getting dumbed down, and then out of nowhere we get this modern classic that people still reminisce about. I mean, everyone remembers that moment where they beat Ornstein and Smorg for the first time. And yes, I can appreciate that irony, that Dark Souls saved gaming for me on the PC when the actual port was terrible. Back to Sekiro, I don't want to give a review on the game because I think there's plenty of great review channels out there, IGN permitting, and instead I want to focus on how Sekiro helps or doesn't help the game industry going forward in terms of how it might lead to other quality games and how the design decisions can be expanded on or carried over to other great games or genres. So with Sekiro, it's obviously a little bit more story focused than other From Software games. I noticed it was a little bit more in your face compared to say Dark Souls, where if you didn't pay attention, you'd find yourself on the wiki not too long after, wondering what the fuck was going on. I even read today that the director was going to explain the story more clearly to the team the next time around, because some team members often had no idea about a lot of it. Proving right the old joke of even From Software don't know what's going on in their stories. As for Sekiro's less subtle story, I think it's fun. Dark Souls had a lot of multiplayer elements, so it makes sense that narrative was kept as mostly optional, while in Sekiro, being strictly single player gives them a lot more freedom to present the story more traditionally. And the story is pretty cool. It's a good video game story in that it fits around the gameplay quite well. It sets up a really cool adversary in Genichiro Ashina. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And the great part of this is when you face off against him properly, you do feel like you're going up against a really tough warrior, so when you finally prevail, it's both incredibly satisfying from a gameplay perspective, but also a story perspective for your character, Sekiro. Expanding on what I meant by video game story, a story that works well for a movie or a novel does not necessarily translate well to a video game. There's amazing video game stories that I love, like Planescape Torment and Grim Fandango, but they work not just because they tell a great tale, but because they fit so well around the medium in their respective genres. Sekiro isn't really a classic when it comes to story, but it works really well and it sets up the game perfectly for the big moments. Looking at the start of the game, it ticks all the right boxes, though I do have a feeling Activision probably pushed some of the more hand-holdy moments like having a dummy you can practice combat on, along with eavesdropping, which allows you to get clues on how to fight enemies or bosses. But I'm only speculating here, and maybe From Software were listening to the easy mode crowd this time around. The good news is, it isn't in your face. It's optional, and while I did take advantage of the dummy a few times myself, I love that they managed to fit it into the game's story instead of taking you out of the world and having it in like a menu screen, for instance. There are a few more cutscenes than usual for a From game, but they got the balance right, and they built up some of the important moments really well. I don't dislike cutscenes entirely, but they're best used sparingly, and should be a treat when something really special happens, not used over and over again. There's nothing worse than having control taken away from you, the player, because the developers were too lazy to find a way to push the story forward organically through gameplay. However, there were some really iconic moments for me in the game, and they often did come from the cutscenes. Spoiler warning, but Genichiro's third phase, that was really awesome. Seeing the lightning and everything behind him, and you know you're in for a really epic fight just when you thought it was over. And then you see Ao later on back from the dead, and he's looking at the view of Japan like he's going to take over one day, and you just know in his tone of voice that he's not your nice old foster father anymore, and something really big is going to happen. Then you've got the Divine Dragon, and that set piece is amazing. And then lastly, when the final boss is revealed, and that is a really, really special fight. These are the sort of moments that gave me chills, and they're moments only the video game medium can bring, and I often don't get these anymore. They're the mark of a classic game, classic moments like we remember from our favourite old games, and I'm glad some games can still do this. I hope classic iconic moments like this can be more frequent. Looking deeper at the game, stealth is obviously a big focus, and I scrutinize this a lot because stealth is one of my favorite genres. I think it's good for the industry whenever stealth is at the forefront, because so many publishers seem scared by the concept because it takes you out of combat. Publishers are worried that whenever something exciting isn't happening, through button mashing enemies or watching graphic focused cutscenes, players will get bored and switch off. You only have to look at good old BioWare, who share this philosophy.
And that's when you press a button, something awesome has to happen. So button awesome.
I don't know if they really got the stealth right, but good on them for going down a path of adding gameplay variety. Doesn't happen enough, and that's a positive for me. Then of course there's the bosses, the FromSoft staple. And it's the big talking point because most of the people whinging about easy modes are doing so because they can't beat certain bosses. I'll tell you something about the bosses. For the most part, they're actually the easiest in From Software games because a similar strategy works against the majority of them. The game wants you to learn to parry. It even has block and parry on the exact same button, so you aren't scared to give it a try, and once you nail it, you feel awesome, you feel like the pro you never were in Dark Souls because you were too scared to ever attempt the parry because you knew you'd fail. At least that was me. But seriously, I think this is great because you'll likely get to a point where you're stuck on Lady Butterfly and or Genichiro, and there's no way forward unless you learn to parry. Or learn to be as patient as someone waiting for loot drops in Anthem by actually hacking away at their health for half an hour, but that's not the intended methods at all. It's genius though, because it's the best method of sword fighting I have ever seen in a video game. And that's because you're not just button mashing. You have to time your parries, watch the boss's posture bar build as you succeed in your fight, until finally, you're just too much for your enemy. And doing damage isn't useless by the way, because in doing so, the boss will recover posture much slower in the fight. The combat is incredible because the effort you're putting in on your controller is actually reflective of what is going on the screen. This isn't an Arkham Batman game where you press a button or two and the character is flying around the screen like a maniac. This is tight, player-directed gameplay where your timing and choices matter. There's no hand-holding with these fights. You need to learn, adapt, and only then will you succeed. Learning and mastering a system to win is what an action video game should be all about, and to see it in a 2019 AAA game published by none other than Activision is pretty astonishing, and it gives me hope for the future. So how does this all affect the easy mode debate? This may be controversial, but I think all this talk actually has nothing to do with Sekiro or From Software games. Gaming is far more mainstream than it was 15 years ago, when a few nerdy guys like me played World of Warcraft and the majority of people you went to school with made fun of it. Now everyone and their grandma plays games like Fortnite or Flavor of the Month mobile phone games, and plenty of people are all over Twitch and games media following the latest craze. So how does this relate to the easy mode? Well, players want to be involved in what's the trendy thing right now. At the moment, that just so happens to be Sekiro, and when people who want to be involved play this game struggle and can't join in the discussion immediately, they throw a hissy fit and demand the game cater to them. This is ridiculous. There's harder indie games released every other week, and no one cares because they aren't streamed online or talked about all over YouTube. I mean, obviously there's exceptions, but for the most part, I truly believe that those whining about an easy mode just want to feel involved. It's nothing to do with Sekiro. On that note, shout out to the quadriplegic guy who recorded that video smashing the corrupted monk. That was awesome, and it showed up all these so-called gaming journalists out there. Exploration is another focus from really nails well, and I want to see other publishers follow suit. There's no bland open world here with barely anything truly handcrafted. Yes, I'm thinking about Ubisoft games when I say that. Don't get me wrong either. This game is open, and at a point in the game, you have 4 different paths you can potentially take, all leading to unique areas. What I mean is that when traversing these areas, the level design is on point, and you just feel compelled to explore every nook and cranny. What's amazing too is most of the stuff you pick up is actually junk, and while that could be improved, and even though I knew this would likely be the case, I was still compelled to pick up absolutely everything. I didn't care if it was my 50th Ceramatic Shard or yet another Fistful of Ash to add to the collection, I would still go for it. The key to great level design and collectibles is it's not about what the reward is, it's about the destination. If I'm having fun exploring and reaching these items, I don't really care what they are because the reward was in the design and how awesome it is to explore handcrafted, delicately designed areas. That said, come on From Software, give me some cool shit to pick up next time. I mean, even a dung pie would be better. What I'm comparing that sort of exploration to though, is something like Assassin's Creed Black Flag. What an absolute chore. I made a point of getting every single Animus fragment in that game, and about halfway through, I realised I was just doing it for the sake of completion, and nothing about it was fun. Getting in a ship, sailing around empty ocean to go to another copy and pasted island, rinse and repeat, no real content, no real exploration, just busy work. I've never felt like exploring in a From Software game was a chore, because they're actually designed to be really challenging, fun and rewarding, not to extend their playtime so they can brag in press releases that there's 80 hours of gameplay to be found. Quality over quantity every single time. So how can the industry get better now that we've seen a great game like this do both critically and commercially well? And that is despite being a brand new IP with no multiplayer component. While we've had a good run so far this year, Resident Evil 2, DMC 5, man, I'll even throw Yoshi's Crafted World in there because it's a cool little game that still feels more challenging than some of the brain-dead crap we've seen from EA recently. So ignoring a couple of questionable games, I'm hoping this great run can continue for indie and AAA releases. I'll even throw EA a bone and praise them for not putting microtransactions in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. I think gamers have shown that this is what they want. They want challenge sometimes. They want to have to learn, fail, have to master a system to get to the end so they feel that great sense of accomplishment that is missing from so many titles that play themselves. Again, Activision of all publishers released this, and I hope that this can be a trend. Not long ago, we had players dying over and over again in Crash Bandicoot Remastered, and that was yet another Activision title. So maybe, just maybe, they're learning. With Anthem bombing, Destiny not being the juggernaut that was once expected, perhaps this can be a turning point. That a well-made, no-strings-attached game can be viable with a decent budget, and this can be the future of gaming. I really hope that the success of this game is the industry getting sent a message, that the last few years or so of service-based, DLC-ridden messes are behind us, and we can get back to building on great games, systems, and content, so that a future Sekiro Shadows Die Twice isn't an anomaly, but is the norm.